The USS Indianapolis, 1945, the night of July 30th, 1945, was silent. The USS Indianapolis, a USS Navy cruiser, returning from a secret mission was halfway across the Philippine Sea when 2 Japanese torpedoes slammed into its side. The ship sank in just 12 minutes. Out of 1,196 men, about 900 made it into the water alive. They thought surviving the explosion was the worst part. They were wrong. The survivors had no lifeboats, no food, and no fresh water. As the sun rose, the ocean began to move. Fins started circling. At first, it was 1 or 2 oceanic white-tip sharks, drawn by the sound and the blood. By nightfall, there were hundreds. Men tried to stay close together, but every few minutes, a scream would echo, then silence. Survivors described how sharks bumped their legs, tested the flesh, then attacked in violent bursts. One sailor watched his friend pulled under the water exploding in red, then nothing. Some men went insane from thirst and fear, pushing others away just to float alone, where sharks found them easier. After 4 days, rescue planes finally arrived. Only 316 men were alive. Over 500 sailors had been eaten alive, torn apart piece by piece in the largest shark attack disaster in recorded history. The SS Nova Scotia, 1942, November 28, 1942, the Indian Ocean off the coast of South Africa. The British ship SS Nova Scotia was carrying over 1,000 people, soldiers, civilians, and Italian prisoners of war when a German U-boat fired a torpedo straight into its hull. The ship sank in just minutes. Those who survived the explosion clung to wooden planks and debris, surrounded by burning oil slicks. But beneath them, the ocean was alive. Dark shapes circled below. Soon, the water erupted in chaos. Tiger sharks and oceanic whitetips began tearing through the survivors. People screamed as sharks ripped off arms and legs, dragging entire bodies down in seconds. The sea turned red as the feeding frenzy grew. A sailor later said, "The screams didn't stop, they just faded one by one." When rescue ships arrived hours later, they were horrified by what they saw: floating life jackets filled with bones, lifeless bodies without limbs. Out of more than 1,000 passengers, only 192 were rescued. The rest disappeared beneath the surface, consumed by a swarm so massive that survivors could feel the vibration of their tails in the water. The Cape San Juan, 1943. November 11, 1943. The American troop transport ship Cape San Juan was hit by a Japanese torpedo in the Pacific Ocean. Hundreds of men were thrown into the sea as the ship went under. They thought rescue would come within hours. But the ocean had other plans. As daylight faded, blacktip and whitetip sharks appeared in the wreckage area. At first, the men just watched fins slicing through the water far away, harmless, or so they hoped. Then, one scream cut through the air. The first man was dragged under so fast no one even saw the shark's head. Blood rose to the surface in thick clouds, and panic spread. The sharks began striking in waves, one attack, then another. They didn't eat to kill, they bit to taste, to tear, to frenzy. Men formed tight circles, kicking and shouting, but it didn't matter. The sharks were everywhere. By the time rescue ships finally arrived, dozens were already gone. Bodies that were pulled from the water had missing arms, legs, or worse, only torsos left floating. The Navy never released the exact number of shark victims, but eyewitnesses described it as a scene straight out of hell, the ocean churning red under a silent sky. The RMS Laconia, 1942, the British ship RMS Laconia was sailing through the South Atlantic in September 1942 when it was torpedoed by a German U-boat. On board were more than 2,700 people, soldiers, crew, and hundreds of Italian prisoners of war. The blast sent them plunging into the sea. Hundreds survived the initial explosion, but what waited in the water was far worse. The survivors clung to lifeboats, surrounded by wreckage and sharks. Witnesses later describe seeing tiger sharks circling the rafts, bumping them, testing them, waiting. Then the feeding began. Men were pulled under without warning, their screams muffled by the water. The sharks attacked anything that moved, legs dangling in the water, arms reaching for debris. Some people tried to climb onto the overturned rafts, others pushed others off in blind panic. When rescue finally came, more than 1,600 people were dead. Many bodies were never found. The few survivors said the sea itself felt alive, as if the ocean had decided who deserved to live. The Red Sea attacks 2010. It was December 2010, in Egypt's most famous resort town Sharm el-Sheikh. The beaches were full of tourists, the water clear and calm. Then, in just 5 days, paradise turned to horror. A series of shark swarm attacks shocked the world. 5 people were mauled, and 1 woman was killed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Divers later reported seeing multiple oceanic white-tip sharks swimming unusually close to shore. They weren't supposed to be there, but something had changed. Local fishermen had been dumping animal carcasses into the sea, luring sharks in with the smell of blood. When the food ran out, the sharks found new prey. The first attack came without warning. A tourist swimming near the reef suddenly screamed as a shark bit through his arm. Within days, more attacks followed. 1 woman was torn apart by multiple sharks at once, her body shredded in seconds. Witnesses described seeing fins circling in shallow water, the sea boiling with motion, then going still. Authorities shut down the beaches for weeks. But the horror stayed because no one could explain why so many sharks had gathered or why they attacked together. Even marine experts said it was unnatural, as if something had triggered their primal instinct all at once. The Red Sea, once a paradise, had become a stage for one of the most painful swarm deaths ever witnessed on camera. The MV Doña Paz disaster, 1987. The MV Doña Paz was a Philippine ferry carrying more than 4,000 passengers when it collided with an oil tanker. The explosion that followed turned the night sea into a wall of fire. Those who survived the flames jumped into the water only to meet another horror. Burned, bleeding, and exhausted, they were surrounded by sharks, drawn by the noise and blood. Rescue teams arrived to a scene of floating bodies, many missing limbs. Survivors claimed the sharks were attacking even as the ocean still burned with fuel. Out of thousands, only 26 people survived. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for similar ones, and feel free to drop suggestions for the next video in the comments.